Hal, where do you see this town going right now? I mean, you've been in this business, you've seen a lot of ups and downs. Have we really turned the corner, and can we look at this industry to be on its feet? I'm talking about the Detroit industry, OEMs and suppliers. Are we good to go here, or are we going to just fall down again?
Is this thing on?
It is.
Well, that's a pretty big question.
I know it is.
I guess the quick answer is there's been enormous progress made. And you think about the last few years, what's happened to all three of the domestic companies, and it's just unbelievable. The change has taken place. But I think, and they probably would agree, there's just a lot more that has to happen before you can say that they're all safely, on the quiet waters. There's just there are so many problems and so many issues. Competition obviously is a massive issue. The health of the home market for these guys is a huge issue, obviously. America is currently, to some degree broken, and we don't function like we should, like we used to, and like we'd like it to be. And there's massive debate over what to do. And, the uncertainty that plagues our financial markets, I think, plague our home markets and our car markets. There are a lot of people who just don't feel like putting out 20 grand or more for a car when they're not sure that they're going to be laid off like the guy next door. It's a perilous time, and for anybody to feel terribly confident at this moment in this country with this level of hangover problem and this level of confidence, I think would be foolish. I think there's been enormous, to America's credit, to the Big Three's credit, enormous accomplishments, and you're going to have to hand it to those guys for what they've done. But I'm sure they would agree it's just one heck of a long way to go.
George, how do you see it from the supplier side? Are suppliers back on their feet? Suppliers in this town especially is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, suppliers in this town, many of whom now are much more global than they were before, but obviously the ones who were totally dependent on Ford and GM, or Ford and Chrysler, or GM and Chrysler, really have had very, very tough times over the last 10 years. But I do think that everyone has learned from this experience. I think when you start to look at where we've been and where we're going, there's been an awful lot that suppliers have learned. I know many suppliers thought they were lean and found out very quickly lean doesn't just mean put in a JIT production line somewhere. So the consolidation, I think, that's gone on in the supply industry is really healthy. Now, in terms of jobs, it's a problem, obviously, because if there's not some trigger that sparks a re-employment, if credit doesn't loosen, all these other things don't happen, then it's a big problem for the job market. But the suppliers are far better positioned than they ever have been going forward. So I think there's a number of things to learn both by OEs and suppliers in this market. And then to Hal's point about the country being somewhat broken, I guess the only silver lining in this cloud of the bankruptcies is the gap between the knowledge of the people in government about how the industry works and how it really works never became more apparent than it did 2 years ago when the CEOs went to Washington. And obviously it's a long way to fix it, but it's very, very apparent now what a big gap that was. And I think even the people in government have learned a lot. And the dialogue that goes on as to where this industry is going, in the end, I think it's going to be very healthy.
Has the government, you were going to say something?
Yeah, can I suggest you join the panel and give us some, you've got as much experience as anybody else on this platform. What are your views?
I'm extremely bullish on Detroit. I think that, the Obama administration gets a lot of credit for coming in and bailing out GM and Chrysler, forcing them through bankruptcy, but forcing them to do the right things. Their legacy costs are largely gone right now. I mean, you saw some of the numbers Mark Fields put up. They didn't go through bankruptcy, but they went through many of the same restructurings. They're making really impressive levels of profit right now, even though sales are in the gutter. GM is solidly profitable, still has a lot more upside. Chrysler's at least got an operating profit. And again, you know, we're talking a SAR of 11.5 or something like that, and yet they're looking pretty good. My prediction all along has been by 2012, end of 2012, I think Ford will report all-time record profits in the history of the company, even including inflation, adjusting for that. I think GM's probably about a year behind Ford, and Chrysler about a year behind GM. So as far as automotive goes, I'm very bullish on Detroit. As far as everything else, no, I'm not so bullish.
Well, another thing, I think that, you know, Mark talked about scale, but, you know, it's a word that's been used around the industry and around manufacturing forever. You know, everybody always talked about scale. But really what they learned was much more than just scale. Not only have they reduced the capacity, and I'm not talking about Ford only, but everyone, but that you need to have more flexible capacity where you have capacity. And then probably one of the biggest lessons that they learned, which is something the U.S. automakers, you know, I always criticized them for, because it's something they had control of and never fixed, and that is the cost of complexity, part number complexity in their vehicles. I mean, it was just so out of control compared to some of the foreign automakers. And while they had other things, an albatross around their neck in terms of past pension liabilities and, you know, some of the other issues, this is something they could have controlled. They saw it very clearly when the foreign competitors started eating their lunch, but they never paid a lot of attention. Now they have paid a lot of attention to that. And that helps both the automakers and the suppliers. And obviously has an advantage to consumers because it does affect the overall price.
Hal, you talked about the government getting more involved now, or you both have. But what do we do here? We've got, you know, the emission standards that keep getting stricter and stricter. And by the way, that makes it more difficult to hit fuel economy standards. And then we've got safety standards that keep adding more and more structure and complexity and weight to the car, which drives up fuel economy and emissions. And so while, yeah, it's been great to see Washington help bail out the big three, really just to save jobs, we don't see a policy that's nurturing and growing our industry, which we see in just about every other country in the world that's got an industry. What do we do to wake up the government to say, you need to at least, yeah, we have to push for better safety, cleaner skies, all that kind of stuff. But how do we do it in a way that at least we're not at loggerheads with each one of these sets of regulations?
Well, that's a really good question. I think by the way, I share your praise of the Obama administration for what they did. That, you know, right before the election, when McCain said he'd let him die, I shift my vote, and he did the one good thing. I voted for him. Everything else has been a disaster. But, we have an industry. My house has a little bit of value in it, and you know, so yay for that. But as you look at the American scene in terms of the industry, the domestic industry, and also look at the vitality of manufacturing in this country, our desperate need for a new approach to jobs. Something desperately has to happen. Obviously, if the industry will come back, and I think we all feel it will, it's just we'll feel better when we see it actually happening. I think there'll be some impact on jobs, but I think we need some fundamentally different policies. And I don't know the answer. It's going to take different leadership, I think, to get it. If you look around the world, one of the things that works is a situation where the government and the local car companies and the local unions work together. I mean, the Germans do it, the Japanese do it, the Koreans do it. They do it marvelously. Here, for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer, for some reason, there's hostility. If you look at the auto industry, you look at the government, you look at the union, it's just, it's three separate camps and they hate each other. And as long as they do it, as long as they refuse to work together, it's going to cost Americans jobs. The car industry is the core of the manufacturing industry. It affects steel, aluminum, copper, zinc, parts, computers, semiconductors, everything. And why we don't do for this industry what the Japanese do for their auto industry, I have no idea.